gone this week and last week, and Erica, Chelsea, and I have been filling in. Right, so today, I'll continue what Chelsea began, talking about right livelihood. But going back a few steps, the Eight Noble Path, oh, that's very funny. I'm sorry, the Eightfold Path stems from the Four Noble Truths. And I really like the way that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about the Four Noble Truths. And he said, first there's ill being. Okay, that's suffering. And second, there's a path that leads to ill being. And then the third one is that there is well-being, and that there is a path leading to well-being, which the Eightfold Path stems from. So how do we take the path that leads to well-being? Well, you follow the Eightfold Path. Okay, so as you know, it's right speech, right action, right livelihood, which comes under the division of moral virtue, also known as ethics. So good ethics is right speech, right action, right livelihood. Okay. So you might have seen the link in our latest newsletter. There's a link there to Bhikkhu Bodhi's book called The Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the end of suffering. And he in his book, he's very descriptive of what we should do to maintain a right livelihood. And Chelsea talked about those things. I mean, things you already know, like you don't deal drugs and you don't traffic people and things. And further, what Chelsea was talking about is you don't participate in those either. So it's one thing to like, be a thief, but it's another thing. It's just as bad to maybe buy those things that the thief steals, which is creating a market, is what Bhikkhu Bodhi says. So we don't want to create markets and encourage these people either, or these actions, I should say. Oh yeah, right. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the term right, which I know has been talked about before, but I always like to repeat it because it's so important. We don't talk about right in terms of right and wrong. We don't go to that dualistic way of thinking. But we do want to, the context refers to actions, thoughts, and intentions that are beneficial, skillful, and promote well-being for oneself and others. So it's not about a rigid moral code, but rather about understanding the nature of reality and acting in accordance with that understanding. So think of it as being on Buddha's path. That's the quote right path, the right livelihood. So when we talk about the right livelihood, we're talking about engaging in work that doesn't create harm. Okay, so, but beyond not creating harm, I believe we each have an inner drive to bring forth our gifts, to pour ourselves out lavishly and generously for the benefit of others. Sometimes when people think of being of service and pouring out our gifts for others and being paid for it, we have the idea that in order to make a contribution that matters, we need to be involved in a world-changing endeavor, such as developing a cure for disease. My sense is that this misses the point. Scale doesn't equate with meaning. Seemingly small contributions can be profoundly impactful and even life-saving. So it's important to recognize that the contribution a company can make, even if it's filling what looks like a mundane need. An example would be, for example, a company that makes tires. Okay. Which could describe how quality tires save lives. Okay. We each have the opportunity to connect with the highest expression of our work. Its underlying purpose of enhancing people's lives. In so doing, we can focus on excellence and quality as a way to give our gifts to others. And here's a key point that it really stood out for me that I wanted to share with you. When it comes to right livelihood, there's what we do, the purpose of our work, and then there's how we do it. I believe how is just as important as the what. Yeah. Okay. So, in any line of work that you do, can you engage in the tasks at hand and also pay attention to your state of being? Are we calm, alert, and open? Are we bringing our full presence to whatever is happening? Is our breath silky and smooth or short and choppy? Ah, okay. If we find that we're somewhat absent or disembodied, can we find ways to bring ourselves into grounded presence in the midst of our working life? Perhaps through the feeling in our feet on the ground and our sits bones on the chair, or through taking belly breaths while we're in a meeting. Throughout the course of the day, we can commit to self-awareness and self-regulation, and in so doing, become skillful at releasing tension and coming into presence on the spot, even and especially when stressful events are unfolding. And that really brings to mind my experiences as a teacher. And as you know, I mean, we've all been students and we know what can happen in classrooms. And so there are always moments, especially teaching late adolescents, university age kids, they wanted to use their cell phones or not pay attention or pretend they didn't understand something. And what I just mentioned about taking a deep breath and coming back to that equanimity that we need to solve these problems and deal with these issues is really important. Because I found in teaching that if I was always, losing my temper or just being short or sharp with students, I would lose them. They would not respond as favorably as I would have liked. And if you've been a teacher, Marjorie knows. And so if there are problems that constantly arose, I would say for the 28th or 30,000th time, put away your cell phones. Let's put away our cell phones. Put them away now. Put away the cell phones and never lose my temper, because that was a line that I realized was not a line I wanted to cross. I would lose them. And right. So not that I was ever perfect, but we would also get feedback at the end of the semester. And every job I've ever had teaching overseas, the students always were tasked to filling out feedback forms on our performance and etc. And sometimes it was a little painful and sometimes my ego got bruised, but it was also a path for personal growth and interpersonal intelligence. And so as we used to say in teaching keeps you honest, about who you are and what you do in the classroom. And anyway, so getting back to this,
Marilyn, will you excuse me just a moment?
yes,
I'm so sorry. The only way I can be here is to check my cell phone repeatedly because of the 24/7 care I'm responsible for. So
oh,
please excuse my cell phone.
of course.
I have to check it again right now.
Bring back memories. Oh. We love you, Marjorie. You take care of
These
you.
are given.
Oh,
I don't have to take that.
Yeah, and I'm taking it a little further, if there was a problem with a student, I always learned to take them aside after class, away from judgmental eyes. Oh, she's a mean teacher, and speak to them, one-on-one, and that was most of the time very fruitful to find out what was going on with my students. And again, for me, it was, a chance for personal growth. So, continuing on, so work brings us into relationship with other people. Doesn't matter what you do. Even if you're like an accountant sitting at a desk 24/7 working on facts and figures, you're gonna at some point be coming into interpersonal contact with somebody. So when we come into relationship with other people, we have the opportunity to receive feedback that can help us grow our self-awareness and relational skills. Can we communicate more effectively to bring out the best in others? How can we become more skillful as collaborators and members of a team? Do people know that we appreciate them? And if not, why not? Work can be a crucible for personal growth. When we approach our work in that way, the fruits of our learning spill into all of our relationships. So we've all had, not just me, teacher to students, but teacher to teacher and teacher to our managers. Sometimes we had managers who faced great challenges through their lack of skills, interpersonal skills. And I've just found the best way to deal with them was just to be very neutral and don't offer advice, don't offer criticisms, just, do what they say and get through the day. And working with other teachers, collaborating on projects. I sometimes work with people who have wonderful ideas and say, wow, that's a great approach to, teaching essay writing and teaching reading skills. Do you mind if I borrow that? Oh, no, go right ahead. So creating that supportive atmosphere in the workplace, I think, is really, really important. It can make or break a job, as you know. We've all been there. So it says through work, we can develop strength of character. Something goes wrong at work every day. How do we respond? But we can come to see the possibility in situations and not just the loss and frustrations. We become deeply resourceful people. We can become people who can cope with uncertainty, who can pivot, and who have greater trust in the winding ways life unfolds. We develop the capacity to get creative, and we stretch ourselves, becoming vulnerable in new ways and learning how to ask for, give, and receive help. We grow into people who possess humility and the ability to embrace and overcome challenges. So in my life, I found a direct correlation between what I put into something and what I get out of it. If we pour ourselves into being of service to others, and we treat our work like the honorable and rigorous journey of personal growth that it is, what comes back to us is deep satisfaction, the feeling of a job well done. And I'm sure this applies across the board to many, many lines of work, but when you go into a task and you find that there are bugs that come up, it's always really helpful to look at those bugs, go back and do better the next time. Just do better next time, do better next time until that task becomes really smooth and rewarding, and then you have a feeling of a job well done. But you had to be open to a little self-criticism in order for that to be done, and that's what this is talking about here. Okay. So in my last job before I retired, a major part of my work was getting students to use their English language skills. They in our many universities I taught at, English language was a prerequisite for graduating. They had to take it as part of their coursework. And so we got all the students, no matter what their major was, they had to learn English language skills. And this is every country I've ever taught in. So the last job I had was developing essay skills and doing research to back up those claims that they would make. And so the same, so what am I trying to say here? Oh, okay, through this research and writing and presentation set of skills that we did, I encourage my students to be open-minded to new ideas and to the experiences of people coming from different social backgrounds. But there were aspects of the job I found difficult and at odds with right livelihood, because these aspects created suffering on the part of students. For example, giving a single grade to their classroom performance was not truly reflective of their whole ability. And my mother used to say this too. She was a teacher and she started teaching in the 60s, you know, and I'll never forget her mentioning that to me. And it was that the more I taught, the more I agreed with her. You know, we all have different intelligences. And a single grade really doesn't reflect all of those different intelligences that we each have. So this university system demanded a single grade, even though educational research has proven that grading discourages learning. There was nothing I could do about this. So I tried to balance this approach by avoiding harsh speech, showing compassion when they were having difficulties, or imposing my views on them, which was difficult in an environment where the ruling government discouraged opinions that challenged the status quo. So this is really, really something challenging. I had to, because of the political climate in China, I really had to counsel students on choosing topics for their essay writing and oral presentations that didn't ruffle any political feathers. That was really challenging. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Okay. So there were things I could do outside the classroom, and I really love meeting one-on-one with students as they were preparing their oral presentations or their research writing, and meet with them individually or in very small groups of 2 or 3 and give them some one-on-one feedback. That was very satisfying. And yeah, I hope that met the criteria for right livelihood, you know, bringing that encouragement and compassion into teaching. Sometimes challenging and sometimes very rewarding, as all things in life are. Anyway, okay, continuing on. There's a book that Chelsea mentioned also called Instructions to the Cook by Bernie Glassman. If you have heard of him, he's a wonderful, wonderful person. He passed away many years ago. And he based this book on Dogen's Tenzo Kyokon, Instructions to the Cook. And I'll just read you the blurb. He says, Zen is not just about what we do in the meditation hall, but what we do in the home, in the workplace, and in the community. So Inspired by the 13th century manual of the same title, the instructions to the cook describes the innovative business model Roshi, Bernie Glassman, developed to revitalize a poverty-stricken section of Yonkers, New York. So Glassman shows how social engagement can be used as a spiritual practice to promote both personal and societal transformation. Okay. So here, Bernie Glassman received a transmission from Mayuzumi Roshi, and then Bernie Glassman transmitted, you've heard of these people, Pat Enkyo O'Hara, Peter Matheson, the author. If you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend the book, The Snow Leopard. It's an actual journey he took with, what was the naturalist name? Some famous naturalist. They go hiking up into the Himalayas to study the snow leopard and spend a lot of time trying to find the snow leopard. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's a very Zen journey that they both take into the Himalayas. Anyway, I digress. And he also, Bernie Glassman also gave transmission to Joan Halifax. Yeah, among many others. He also had an association with Jeff Bridges. They were great buddies. Yeah, it's just, I mean, you know, this net of Indra, I just love this generational passing down of Dharma knowledge. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh. So in 1980, Bernie Glassman founded the Zen community of New York. In 1982, he opened the Grayston Bakery in Yonkers, New York, which initially provided jobs for the Zen students and evolved into an effort to alleviate the widespread homelessness in the area. He emphasized that it's not the business that makes right livelihood, it's the way we do business. Again, you know, the same sentiment. The bakery provided jobs for inner city residents who lacked education and skills. Grayston employed low-skilled workers from the neighborhood, many of whom were unhoused themselves, and sold baked goods to shops and restaurants in Manhattan. These workers were put into positions that reflected their talents, skills, and background. If someone had a background in sales, they would be put at the front counter. If a worker had past experience as a mechanic, they would be put to work maintaining the bakery machinery. Even unskilled workers could be trained in a bakery setting, which provided income to unhoused people. So Bernie wanted to engage in a livelihood that would not produce anything that would harm people. He needed a business that could be a vehicle for training, personal growth, and spiritual transformation. Baking also had another advantage. Bakers need many of the same qualities we develop in our Zen practice: detailed care, mindfulness, meticulous attention, and harmonious interaction among all persons involved. So that's a really shining example of right livelihood. He just, and there's another example. Oh, yes, I've got lots of examples. What are we doing for time? Good. All right. Have you know, everyone knows about Chobani yogurt, right? You've heard of Chobani.
Yeah.
Of course. Okay. Well, the CEO is a Kurdish Turkish man called Hamdi Ulukaya, and he emigrated to this country because of the political situation with Kurds in Turkey and Syria and Iraq. It's a very sad situation. He came from a family that made yogurt. So when he emigrated to the US, he settled in, well, leading up to this, he saw this flyer for a failing Kraft Foods factory that made yogurt in Edmiston, New York in 2007. So he brought his yogurt making skills, called in a world-class yogurt maker from Turkey to come help him with the best recipe. And okay, this is in 2007. By 2010, he had $1 billion in sales. Yeah, yes. So he went out of his way to hire refugees just like himself. 30% of the employees are refugees. He provides, he provided English language training skills. He provided counseling as far as mental health counseling, housing. He referred them to affordable housing. And then 10% of the ownership he gave to employees. And some long-term employees became millionaires. He also pays his employees a little bit above minimum wage, which is better, I guess. He also gives 6 weeks parental leave to his employees. That's across the board. If you're a gay couple who want to adopt, he's there. 6 months, 6 weeks parental leave. If you want to,
Paid?
I'm sorry?
Do you know if it was paid leave?
Paid leave, yes, oh, sorry. It is 6 weeks paid leave,
Thank you.
yes. He gives 10% of his profits to charities and organizations, donates to veterans groups, et cetera. It just goes on. And his business has expanded, and there's Chobani products everywhere and factories all over the world now. And his business model is: business people should promote a sense of purpose in their corporate culture to create a climate of positive change in business and the world. Companies should focus on humanity and social responsibility, and not just their bottom lines. Okay, and one more example that I just love, I would strongly encourage you, that goes to more of a really deeply Zen sentiment, is a movie called Perfect Days. Perfect Days. We saw that movie. All right, and it's a Japanese movie made in conjunction with Wim Wenders, the German director. And in this movie, excuse me, the main character is a man called Hirayama, who earned a living by cleaning toilets around Tokyo. He was quite content in this line of work, even though we get a sense that he had a completely different white-collar job. What struck me was how much he was at peace with his life through his total devotion for his work. For each task, he was just happy to be alive. His pride in his work is apparent by its thoroughness and precision. And going back to what Bernie Glassman said about the qualities that we need to develop in our Zen practice towards work, which is detailed care, mindfulness, meticulous attention, and harmonious interaction among all persons involved, which is what Hirayama did in his line of work. He reminded me of the Zen saying, chop wood, fetch water, as a means of celebrating the fact that we are alive and the importance of being present and focusing on the mundane tasks of daily life. The phrase is a reminder to embrace the present moment and find meaning, joy, and fulfillment in the simplest actions, that is, in our work life, as well as our personal life. So bringing this awareness to our work can bring us contentment, joy, and fulfillment. Okay, so I better be quiet now and set us up for group discussion. So maybe groups of 3, and online, groups of 3.
You got
Oh,
3 people
we've got
online, so
3
that'll
people
work
then.
out very
Oh,
well.
dear. Okay, so, the question, and you can really discuss anything that came up, but what does right livelihood mean to you in terms of your work or work that you've done? What does that mean to you? All right, so let's begin.